What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 36 of the Steam Deck podcast, Flip Screen Games weekly podcast all about Valve's portable PC powerhouse, the Steam Deck. I am your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my partners in Steam Deck-related crimes, Mr. Stephen Radford.
Hello, hello.
And Mr. Max Wright.
Ahoy, ahoy. I feel like I want to mix it up for seeing as you've mixed up the entire intro to this, that I should mix up my
Yeah, something other, like something else naval related. You know?
See,
yeah.
I think it
belly
actually
button,
works.
belly button.
I think it works the best on this show because it's like, like full steam ahead, right? Like
Oh yeah.
steamboat, Steam Deck.
It's
Like I feel like there's plenty of room for nautical puns when it comes to the Steam Deck.
Yeah. All right, cool. I'm gonna change it for the other ones then.
Locked it in. I'm glad we can figure that out today, boys. But yeah, we got a good show ahead of you. We've got some rumors about a thermal revision for the Steam Deck, which Steve is going to break down for you guys in just a second. And then, of course, the news that Proton 8.0 is released. So obviously, that is quite a big development, and I'm sure Steve can tell us all about it because I'm imagining that you and the rest of the Tinkers are pretty excited about this.
This is a show of Steve explaining concepts to us.
And you and I sit there and we're like, oh, that's cool. That's really good.
Every week we're like, guys, we think some massive stuff's happened, but neither of us understand it. Luckily, Steve's here to explain it all to us like we're children. And then by the end, we're like, yeah, cool.
What happens when I'm not around? What do you talk about?
We skip specific things.
There was definitely the last episode. Yeah, the last episode that was just me and Max. There was a segment that we pushed because we were like,
It was the SMT update. We were like,
oh
luckily
yeah,
it's
the
not out
SMT
yet,
stuff.
so we can just skip this because we don't know what it means. And I could try and blag it, but like I don't want to mislead anyone.
I know it's important, but I can't explain it to you.
Yeah. And I know the one time that I try and blag it and just like read off of like if you were to give me like crib notes and I was to read off of it, I know that someone in a comment would be like, "Oh hey Max, seeing as you're an expert on this, can you tell me about the thermal throttling of yada yada?" And I'd go, "Oh no, I couldn't."
You also run into the problem, right? Where like the whole format of the show, right, works because it's like, okay, Steve brought this interesting thing. We'll lob it to him. He'll explain it. We ask some questions. If you introduce the topic and then I'm like, oh, so what does that mean for the casual user, Max? And you're like, I do not know.
We are the straight guys. That's our part in this.
Yeah.
Not in. I realized what I've.
I mean, it works on two levels.
Like,
it's fine.
Yeah, it does.
Anyway, let's jump into the thermal revision conversation because this is actually a podcast about the Steam Deck, right? So this story started getting some traction over on the Steam Deck subreddit. And it's like some photos of what appears to be a new it's like a shot of the Steam Deck motherboard with some new thermal solutions and some like I don't know, there's like a couple different little hardware updates here that I can see. And I know, Steve, you broke it down here. There's like we're looking at a new fan, we're looking at some different numbers on the boards too. Like what do you make of these changes? Like, how significant does this look to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty big revision. It's the biggest revision we've seen internally. The other revisions we've seen, they've put some foam on the back panel, and that allowed them to go back to using Delta fans because that mitigated the whine noise. It kind of just pushes the fan in. And if you send your unit in for RMA, that's essentially what they do to fix it. They just put a new back panel on now. But this is completely different. We've got a different fan design. We've got a different shaped motherboard. The heatsink looks different. According to the commenter, there was no thermal pad between the heatsink and the EMI shield now. You'll notice if you look at the photos as well, the EMI shield is now this kind of black metal rather than the just shiny metal that you had to like take the piece of tin off of, like the tin tape off of if you ever wanted to get to the SSD. There's some cables now hidden underneath the battery that were previously exposed above the battery, which makes some repairs more tricky, some repairs easier. It looks like you're not going to have to pull off a piece of tape to get to an SSD or to replace like the Wi-Fi chip anymore. but some other repairs might be a little bit trickier because you will have to remove the battery in its entirety in order to get further down now. Um, but it's interesting because this was from the Chinese forum Baidu. Apparently, someone bought their Steam Deck, and there's been a few pictures that have been posted. There's a bunch over on the Steam Deck Discord as well, where people were talking about it. And the third picture, I think, is the one that's most interesting for me over on Reddit, which shows it on top of the kind. You remember like when you got your Steam Deck, it had that like welcome piece of paper,
Yeah.
and you can kind of see that underneath it. Because initially I thought, well, if the revision numbers, because the motherboard's marked revision C and the daughter boards are marked revision B, whereas the current boards are revision E and F. So that's obviously an older revision. So I initially thought, well, maybe this was like a prototype that got out into the wild somehow, but it looks like there's potentially a few of them out there now. There's been a couple of posts over on Reddit. There's obviously been the posts on Baidu. So it looks like there's potentially a few of these floating around the place. So and if it's being shipped with that translated welcome sheet, obviously Asia's the newest market for the Steam Deck. I can't
Right.
imagine that this is an old prototype. Well, that was initially my thinking was, oh well, one of the dev units got out. I mean, it could be faked, but I don't know why someone would go to this length to fake it because it's interesting, but it's not like it's anything groundbreaking. It's a new fan design.
Yeah, yeah. It feels like a strange thing to try and make a hoax out of because it's like it's not so electric that like you see that like potential for virality, you know? It's kind of just like, yeah, this is interesting. But it's only interesting to like a fraction of a
A
fraction of
very, very small niche number of people, yeah, who are potentially who have a Steam Deck and then are even interested in what the Steam Deck looks like inside to the
Yeah.
point where they might listen to a podcast about it or go on a subreddit. But for the majority of people, it's not. I think there's probably a few reasons why they're doing this. I hope that fan, which looks very much just like a laptop fan, is two things. One, easier to replace and cheaper with a generic part. So you don't have to buy a Delta fan or I think it's the Huayong fan from iFixit anymore in order to replace the part. You can just go and get one from any laptop. And I hope it's quieter and more efficient. So I think that's probably the reason why they've made the revision. If that's the case, is to make it probably quieter. It's one of the biggest complaints people have about the Steam Deck is the thing is really loud, especially if you had one of those early models with a Delta fan
yeah.
like I do. And this could potentially mitigate it. This is the similar looking fan that is used in the ROG Ally that we saw from the breakdown photos that they posted, and a similar looking fan that's in the Switch as well. It's a pretty common kind of design where you have like the fan and it like exhausts the air up. And someone put together like an overlay of the current fan and the new fan.
Steve, real quick, can you
And
confirm for me that the image you have in the document is the image you're referencing? Because I'm trying to open the imager link and it will not open.
Yeah, I had the issue. You have to open it in incognito mode, and it's a GIF. I don't know why it wouldn't
Got
load
it.
for me, but I opened it in incognito mode, and it worked.
Okay. Cool.
yes,
I'll pull it
so
up so
that
people can see it
image
for themselves.
that image is the new fan, and then the older, I think it's the Delta fan overlaid over the top, so you can see the size difference. There's not actually that big of a difference in terms of size, but it looks like more of a generic part. I'd be very interested if someone gets their hands on one of these and is able to do a bit of a comparison in terms of um, both like how efficient is it? Is it keeping the Steam Deck cooler? Are we seeing those performance gains? And also, like, how loud is this thing? Are we getting rid of any kind of whine? Are we getting rid of like fan? Does the fan not need to kick in until later on? Um, but it seems like if this is true, it's a pretty significant change that Valve has just quietly made, and potentially is going to the Komodo um, retailers out in Asia before it gets shipped around the rest of the world.
I wonder how long it is until we see one over here, and maybe we see one over here, and we can actually have a conversation with someone and get these sort of tests out of them. It could even come out of Asia anyway, this sort of information, but
The
harder
interesting
for us to
question
find,
is
harder for us
like,
to decipher.
I think the interesting question is like, if you were to order a Steam Deck now, is this what you would get?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Right?
wondering. But I wonder if like Steve said, they're focusing this new one on the Asia market for now, and then maybe then they'll do it
Maybe,
over here.
but I'm wondering
Um,
if there wasn't, because I mean, I that there'd be a question I guess worth answering there in terms of like how many places are manufacturing them at this point, because our understanding early on was that it was really only like one facility that was making
mhm.
them. So the idea, and again, right, I'm just an armchair commentator, so I know nothing about like what production of a large scale rollout of like a worldwide product is like. But I don't see it making a ton of sense. The idea of like, okay, let's roll out this new version in a brand new market and not in the existing markets. Like I would think it would be a, in the same way that we saw, just a few months ago, right? Sony made revisions to the interior of the PS5, where if you buy a PS5 now, it's going to have different interiors than the ones that Steve and I have from launch.
But you'd have no idea just looking at it externally. It looks like the same thing, and that's the same thing
And
here
it
with the
operates
Steam
the
Deck.
same way,
It looks the
ideally.
same way, yeah, yeah. But that one we did see was way. I think it was Austin Evans on YouTube managed to get hold of one pretty early on, and he was able to find out that one, the motherboard is way smaller in size and has clearly
Mhm.
gone down to a different nanometer process, and it's more efficient because of that. It's drawing way less power. So I would imagine there's some kind of gain here. They're not going to switch over to a new design for no reason. It's either cost saving or the performance gains on this, or
Right.
the quality of life gains on this
Or
are that
ideally both.
extensive.
Like that's also a possibility that they like found a better part that was a better fit, and they were able to get some deal right for the next several years. This will be what goes in the Steam Deck, that kind of thing. Yeah, so I mean, I'm sure you're right. I'm sure that the reason they made this was to either cut costs and improve their profit margin, or like you said, hopefully to address one of I think the most common issues that at least early adopters seem to have with the deck. Right? Like I don't particularly think of the fan as being like a major issue, but
Does
Which
I
get quite
also
fan did
loud.
you get?
I,
Which
I
fan did you get?
have I have from the wave right after the one you have, where they made the first revision with the
Yeah, but
quieter
it
fan.
tells you it'll tell you in the hardware now on the Steam Deck. You can actually find out exactly what parts you've got.
I
in your
remember
Steam Deck.
because you brought this up once and we looked it up, and that's why I remember. It was like I
Yeah,
don't have
I've
the
got a
super
Delta
noisy
fan.
one. I have the one that came after the Delta one was.
Yes, my dad has that fan too, and it's significantly different in terms of tone. It's more of like a lower pitched roar
Which is why
as
it doesn't.
the
I don't think
sound's
it
coming
bothers
out,
me. Is like
whereas mine has a whine.
it doesn't have
reminds me
that
of
hiss. Yeah.
reminds me of the PS4, like being off in a corner somewhere, and
Uh-huh.
Yes,
just
it
while
very
you're
much
playing again,
sounds
there's
like that. Yeah,
constantly a
It's like,
when
it's
it
like a
does
space
stuff.
heater, like
Yeah,
it's just
it
like a nice
picks up.
dull like brown noise,
Yeah, but I would hate I'd hate that when I'm trying to play a
that's
game.
the fan I've got. So
Yeah.
I've been considering replacing my fan for a while now. I'm on the watch list on iFixit, waiting for the fan to come back in stock. I think everyone bought them all up, and it's I've not been able to
Watch
get
list
hold
or
of one
wait
yet.
list? Watch list
Yeah.
sounds like you've done something wrong.
Well, it says like you watch. Well, I guess it's like email me when
It's
it's
a
ready.
wait
Okay.
list,
like,
right? Like I
wait
think
list,
it's like got
whatever.
Steve on a watch list. Like we won't
Yeah,
sell
they're
him
like,
anything.
Yeah.
keep our eyes on that guy.
He's
But I wanna
building.
do
He's
ev-
building illegal Steam decks.
Yeah, I'm the one making these new thermal revisions. It's not Valve at all. I'm shipping them all over to China. I'm waiting though to do the fan and the SSD and potentially swapping out the sticks for the Ghillie Kit Hall Effect
You gonna
sticks
lower it
all
too,
in
or
one hit. Am I gonna what lower it?
you're
No,
gonna
but
lower
I do
it?
want I do want to overclock and undervolt it. I'm gonna plan on doing that at some point. To see if I can finally get The Last of Us to
Definitely
play
make sure you
play
document all
well.
that stuff, because I think people would be very interested into like seeing that process. I know I would, especially as somebody who like is increasingly wanting to be braver about doing those things, but is still like, I don't know. Like,
Yeah,
I
you
want to watch
still haven't
somebody do
opened
it.
your Joy Cons. Like, I feel like you should maybe do that before you
That's
take
a
the
good
back
start,
off of.
especially because everyone's
Dude, the
got
Steam
last
Deck.
time I opened up a controller, stuff got messy. Like it got like a sticky button and stuff. It's like a whole problem. It's like I don't know. Man.
I'm looking forward to when Steve has changed everything in his Steam Deck, and we have like an entire episode that's just a theological debate about whether Steve has the same Steam Deck or if
Yeah,
he's
it's
made
like when
himself a brand
it's
new
like when you
Steam Deck.
replace enough parts on a car that they force you
Yeah.
to change your registration plate.
Oh,
in
do
the
they?
UK.
What is it? The
Yeah.
ship of Theseus, right? Is
Or Trigger's Broom is I think the better.
Yes, Trigger's broom. Yeah,
Trigger's
people won't get
Broom.
that reference.
He won't get
The
that reference
British
at all.
British people will.
Yeah, like
it's
ship
so
of what?
it's so
It'd be
cute when you
Trigger's
guys
Broom.
get a little moment like that for me and the 90% of our audience that lives in America.
If you don't know Trigger's Broom, then you guys are missing out on good classic sitcoms. You know, what can I say? But yes, Ship of Theseus is the
The
preferred
Steam
term,
Deck
I'm
of
sure.
Theseus, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many parts do you have
Do
to
you-
replace before it's no longer your same Steam Deck?
I mean,
'Cause I
it's,
feel like you
it's
could probably
interesting,
do
right?
everything.
Yeah. You could buy pretty much every part of a iFixit and assemble one from pieces, I would expect, at this point, if you really wanted to. It would probably cost you a significant amount more because you can
Probably
buy
more
all the
than- yeah.
parts like motherboards, fans.
We should do that.
screens,
That should be a
casing,
video, Steve. We
buttons.
should buy all the raw parts of a Steam Deck and then see if you
Building
can
a
put it
Steam Deck
together.
from scratch.
I bet
Let's
it costs
time it as
over
well.
$1,000 at that point. I bet it
I
costs
think
over $1,000.
yeah, but I mean, it's not about cost effectiveness. It's for the art, you know. Like I just want to see if you can do it.
It's called Content, Steve. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No, never. I'm curious though. Would something like this be enough to get you to upgrade your Steam Deck? And if it was significantly quieter and maybe got performance gains because of it?
I guess it depends on what kind of gains you're talking about. Like, because if we're talking about like
Probably
significantly,
like 5 to 10%, I would imagine.
yeah, and it's like that to me feels like too small of an amount. Not to say that it's insignificant and that Valve shouldn't do it, but it's like, I've always kind of been that way with consoles, you know, is like I am often an early adopter and like I will only go for a revision if there's like a really significant reason to get a revision, you know, like I had a
If
regular
it has
wide.
the Spider-Man logo on it.
Exactly. That is like the one right behind me. You get it. That's a significant upgrade. It has Spider-Man logo and it came with a cool controller. That's a great reason. Also, you know, significant bump in performance, right? Like not a huge leap. Like if there wasn't a really sick PS4 Pro that I wanted, I don't know that I would have gone out of my way to upgrade, but I was happy that I did. But like I never got a Game Boy Advance SP, was perfectly fine with my regular SP. I had a launch 3DS the entirety of that life cycle. So like my
You never got
desire
3DS Plus, whatever they were called? New 3DS?
Nope. Never got one.
Damn.
You know, and it's like granted, I have more money now, so I'm way more like open to being like I bought an OLED Switch because I was like, well, you know, that seems kind of cool. Metroid on that would be fun. So I'm like, I feel like I am willing to make an upgrade for something like that, where it's like, oh, like this is a much better screen, or this has significantly improved processing power. But like a bump of like 5-10% is great, but to me, that feels like when they did the first revision of the Switch, and it's like, it has a slightly better battery life. And it's like, that's a great quality of life thing, but I'm not going to buy a whole new console over it. You know, like, just doesn't necessarily feel like the value's there for me yet. Whereas, you know, I'll be there day one when Valve is like, hey, here's our next round of Steam Decks, and it's got a better screen. It is got a little bit more under the hood. It has better, you know, more storage, better battery life. Like, I would happily go in for an upgrade, but I want to feel like I'm getting bang for my buck, you know, especially because I like the base Steam Deck experience. Like if I had all these problems with it, sure, but I don't. I like it a lot. You know, I think it is a really great piece of tech.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think it does exactly what they promised, which was targeting 720p at 30 frames per second. And it's even overachieved that for me in most games. I can hit like 40 frames per second at 720p, which I'm really happy about.
I feel like my experience has been 60 FPS for most games anyway. Like, I feel like I've just made the necessary sacrifices, or I've just chosen games that run that well.
Some games are fine. I think for me, I like some of the graphical like improvements that you get when you dip down to 30 or 40 FPS versus going all the way up to 60, especially when the screen's that close to my face.
Yeah.
And some games you just can't, you know. Some games you can't even hit 30 at low settings. I'm looking at you, The Last of Us. I'm still trying.
I can't believe how good some games do look on it though. I've been playing Persona 5. The next episode of the Game Club is coming up really soon, and like that game runs is so incredibly well on Steam Deck. Like I'm at 720 60 FPS, and it like on that size of a screen that close to my face, that looks gorgeous. Like it looks better than it looked on my
Yeah.
PS4 Pro. Running at
And that's
a
like a
higher
perfect
resolution.
game to run handheld as well. I always felt like those games played best in handheld, like P4G on the
Yeah,
Vita was so
it's
good,
right at
such a good
home.
experience.
It's very cozy. Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing, right? Like with the dock, like if I do feel like playing it on the TV, like it's easy, and like it that experience translates really well.
I personally haven't. Uh, I just when I was first introduced to the Steam Deck and the dock was sort of like part of that initial reveal for me of okay, it functions like a Switch does, and I don't necessarily know that the dock has lived up to its standard in that way. Like, I
No,
think
it
we had a
has not.
conversation a few weeks ago where I had some cool
Mm-mm.
experience with the dock, and it certainly has a use case. Um, but I don't think that using it for, like you say, they're like, oh, I'm really enjoying this experience of this game that looks really good on this small screen and runs really well. But as soon as I put it on the, even Doom Eternal, which runs everywhere, as soon as I put it into the dock, it's like, oh, that's not a great experience. It's
Persona's the
ugly
only
and
game I've had where it's perfect, where it's like
okay.
exactly the way
See,
you'd want it.
I've had some like Vampire Survivors, Cult of the
Oh
Lamb,
yeah,
smaller titles like that are
yeah.
Cult of
great,
the
and
Lamb worked
those are
really well that way too. I'll give you, yeah, that was another one that
and
translated well.
and they're nice to play on TV every now and again, or if you want to show someone. I also play like FMV games or like horror games on the TV as well. They're also really good, and sometimes you can only get those on Steam. Like if they're smaller indie titles, they're not released anywhere else, so it's nice to be able to play that. And I think the dock's good if you want to play with a keyboard and mouse. Obviously, it's a good way to be able to do that.
Mhm.
Um, but I would agree with you, Max. I don't think it's lived up to the expectations. It's still missing features, which I've spoken about at length.
Yeah.
And the more and more I think about it, and the more of these competitors that are coming out, the more I think it was a miss that the Steam Deck doesn't support eGPUs. And I think if the dock did support that, that you could just plug in an external GPU, then it would give you the oomph that you need to power 4K
Yeah.
display.
I just want that so bad. I hope that that's something that they're thinking about for a successor. Like, it would be so cool if, the next Steam Deck 2, whatever you want to call it, did have the ability for you to just leverage the dock to kind of do that thing that I feel like people have talked about since the Switch was revealed, where it's like, oh, is the dock gonna have like a power boost or
Yeah,
something like
have an
that? And it's
actual
like,
thing in there. Yeah.
and I think that would work really well with the docking station if, like what you said, right? If you were able to like support those external drivers and then like just plug them in and just have it be that kind of seamless. When you plug it in, the Steam Deck knows to offload to whatever's plugged into this specific port or whatever. Like that would be so awesome. And it would be
I
so
think
cool to be able to elevate the docked experience to be something that is more, quote unquote, next gen.
I think it's a cool idea. It just makes the cost of the whole thing very, very expensive.
For
Um,
sure.
but hey, I mean, that's what if
It
people
does,
want
but
it,
that's
then they
when
can
you can
get
go
it.
piecemeal, right? You can go
Uh-huh.
and you can buy the Steam Deck, then you buy the dock later. You may already have like an old GPU lying around if you'd recently upgraded your gaming rig, or you can buy something like the 4070 has gone down to like $500 already in like a week. Like no one wants that thing. You could just plug one of those in.
Yeah, like, and I think that's the fun thing is because you're not wrong, right? That like that definitely does like greatly increase the cost, but it's a modular thing. It's an optional thing. It's like and I think that's the fun of the Steam Deck is the ability to kind of like go as far and as deep as you want with it. Like, yeah, the base experience is great, but if you do want to play 4K 60 FPS off of your Steam Deck, this is a way you can do it, right? And this is a way that you can kind of take things to the next level if that's what you're interested in. That would be cool. It would be really cool to be able to like power it up to the size of like a way more expensive rig over time, you know?
Hmm.
Well, we'll talk more about this as it comes. I think we're very interested in any of these kinds of developments just because I think like how transparent they are about the development of the Steam Deck makes the stuff that they don't come out and say even more interesting because it's like, why? Like why, what is the change here? Why aren't you communicating it the way you have other things? And you know, There's so much.
Yeah, I mean, they even said when they changed the fans, they even said that they were looking into it, and then they made the revisions. Like, we came out in that interview that they spoke about, "Oh, we've changed some things already, like, we changed the fans, we changed the buttons, we did X, Y, and Z." So it's interesting that if this is true, they haven't spoken about it at all yet.
Yeah. So we're going to get into some more Steam Deck news here, including the release of Proton 8.0 in just a second. But before that, let me remind you that this episode of the Steam Deck podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of April. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Asobi, Snackago, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. Y'all are the reals to the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. If you want to be just like them and go and show your support, or just get involved in the community however you want to, head over to flipscreen.games. That's our website. You can find links to the Patreon, our Discord, where the conversation keeps rolling between episodes, or you can write into the show and get your thoughts right on the air during one of our question block segments. However you choose to get involved, we really appreciate it. And we thank you for tuning into another episode of the Steam Deck podcast. Like I said, we've got a lot more show ahead of us. But before that, let me give you a word from our sponsors over at Manscaped. Support for the Steam Deck podcast is brought to you by Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped recently launched the Ultimate Men's Hygiene Bundle, the Performance Package. Inside, you'll find the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, Crop Preserver ball deodorant, Crop Reviver toner, Performance boxer briefs, and a travel bag to hold all your brand new goodies. Join the over 7 million men and roughly 14 million balls worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for our listeners. 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code STEAMDECK at manscaped.com. We've all been there. You've got a big date coming up and you want your balls feeling as fresh and aerodynamic as possible. With my old buzzer, I was only one slip of the hand away from disaster. Now, thanks to Manscaped's Lawnmower 4.0, I can keep my downstairs hairs neat and tidy without fear. Their 4th generation trimmer features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to their advanced skin-safe technology. The Lawnmower 4.0 is waterproof and even has a 4000K LED spotlight for when you need a more precise shave. Trust me when I say this, fellas. Your balls will thank you. Get 20% off and free shipping today with the code STEAMDECK when you check out at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com when you use the code STEAMDECK. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped. And we're back. Steve, Proton 8.0, it is here. What does this mean? Why? Because obviously I know we've got a long list of new games that are newly playable thanks to this update, which I think is very cool. Give me the why, though. What is it about this update that makes all of these more playable?
There's no real reason. The reason it's 8.0 is because they use what's called semantic versioning, which in programming is just a way that they number things. So version 8 is a major version. That means it's a breaking change. And the breaking change with version 8 is it requires a GPU that supports Vulkan 1.3. And so because of that, they've gone ahead and said this is now version 8.0. But it is still a pretty big release. It supports a bunch of games. We've obviously got some big hitters in here like Forspoken, Dead Space, Nioh 2, and Disney Dreamlight Valley. The Witcher 3 is on here as well as a bunch of other games, and we'll put the link to the full changelog down in the description.
Can you refresh my memory on this
But there's
one?
some other changes as well.
Was Witcher 3 already playable and then it was made unplayable by the update and now it's getting re-added? That's what happened, right?
As far as I'm aware, yeah, it got made unplayable by the next gen update, I think they called it, and it was then only playable on Proton Hotfix. It's now being rolled into Proton Stable again, so Proton 8.0 can now play the game. There are still a bunch of games you will need Proton Experimental or Proton Hotfix for still. The Last of Us is one of them. Minecraft Legends, which came out this weekend, didn't work on Proton 8, has a hotfix patch. And Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin, and like some of the newer releases, but there are a bunch of others as well.
Can we talk about this one? There's a fix to Poo Shooter, Toilet Invaders, where it used to start to a black screen. That's been fixed, thank God.
Yeah, really, really necessary fix, but
really important.
A couple of other things I want to specifically call out. Fix the Epic Online Services failing to update for Fall Guys return on other games. So if you install games from Epic Game Store and you were trying to play Fall Guys, it might not have worked for you before. Go give it a try with Proton 8. You may have better luck. And then there's a couple of other smaller fixes specifically for the Steam Deck, like Tiny Tina's Wonderland. They've improved the sleep resume functionality, and A Plague Tale Innocence. It showed the on-screen keyboard when starting the game, and you had to close it manually. That they fixed that.
They fixed the 2K launcher too. It looks like there was an update to the launcher that was causing a failure, and they got an update to that as well. So that's
I'm
pretty
really
cool.
sick of these launchers at this
I
point.
didn't know
Like the
it
EA
Just breaking
launcher
it.
screwed everyone over as well.
I didn't know it existed. I played the game. I played. Sorry, I should have said the game. End of the thought train there. I played Bioshock Infinite on the Steam Deck. That's where I started playing it on the Steam Deck, and I was like, "Oh, this is fine, cool." Loaded it on the PC, and I was like, "Why am I having these weird issues?" And it turns out there was just a launcher sitting in the background that I didn't know existed. That had just installed itself while I was installing the game. That wasn't there before, and it was just sitting behind the main window, and I couldn't click on anything because that was the main focus. I was like, "What's happened here? Where did that come from? Where has this 2K launcher appeared from?"
It's
Odd.
awful. I really wish that like Valve would just be like, no, you're not having that.
Yeah.
Didn't the 2K launcher break? I feel like that messed up Marvel Midnight Suns too at launch. Wasn't there? I think there was a fatal error in that as well.
I can believe that.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me.
Probably then got
yeah.
fixed in hotfix or in experimental and is now being rolled into Proton stable, which would make sense if they fixed the failure.
Yeah, it's pretty good though. I mean, it's like it's very cool. It's always really wild to me to just think about how much of the Steam Deck's functionality is like comes from the community, right? And that like Proton makes so many of these games playable is just like insane.
Yeah. I mean, outside of Steam Deck as well. I mean, this obviously supports Linux. You can play any of these games on Linux, but they've just enabled the NVIDIA API on a bunch of games as well in Proton 8. So if you have an NVIDIA GPU, you'll now get DLSS in a bunch of games. Some really big games.
That's
like
awesome.
Ghostwire Tokyo, God of War, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, Hitman, all of those games, like, and a bunch more. Go check out the list over on GitHub. We'll post the link. But your best thing to do is update Proton. It'll automatically do it when you open Steam. But if it doesn't, search for Proton on the Steam store and download Proton 8 and just try the games that potentially weren't working before and now could be working.
Yeah, very exciting. Is there any games on this list that you wanted to play that you're like excited to try on Steam Deck now?
I wanted to play Dead Space, but I think Max told me there were some problems with it, so he was just playing it on PC.
No. The problems I was having was on PC. I actually don't know how it runs on Steam Deck at all. I just lost sound on PC for some reason, unless I had the headphones in. But I think it works now. I mean, the fact they've done this, that they've done this. Sorry, my head's gone all messy. The fact they've done this and included Dead Space in it must mean that it is better. It's playable now, right? Fingers crossed.
Yeah,
You
that
hope.
would
Pretty
be,
worth
that,
giving
that
it a
would be my
go.
guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially if you owned it and you had problems with it, this is definitely the time I would check it out again because maybe now it's gonna work a little bit better for you.
Mhm. I like the thought that someone at Steam was working on Proton and they were like spending a lot of time and a lot of effort getting Chex Quest HD to work, like the breakfast cereal game. And they were like having late nights.
Someone specifically posted a bug report for that over on GitHub. So
Oh,
they had a
really?
look
That
at
would
it.
be why
Yeah.
then. They're probably they're probably someone like pulling like, oh, where are you? Kids are crying, they miss you. It's like I've got to get Chex Quest to work on the Steam Deck. I'll be back when I'm home. I'll be home when I'm done.
These folks are the real heroes, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
It's like I truly believe that. Like it's just an insane amount of work for something that it's like did anyone even ask for this? I don't know, but you made it possible. And like just it's such a dedication to be like everything's gonna run on this fucking thing. All right? That is what we are here to do. And I love it. And I mean not even just obviously the Steam Deck, but the OS in general.
Linux in general, yeah. I think the thing for me is when there's just there's like an issue and it's fixed within hours at the most. Yeah, we saw that this weekend with Minecraft Legends. It was released. It was broken on the Friday. By the time I woke up on the Saturday, I saw Plagman posting about it on Twitter that there was a hotfix patch and it now
It's like,
works.
we got
And
it.
it's
We
just like,
got
oh,
it.
great, cool.
Yeah, very, very nice. So yeah, definitely make sure you go check the link below. We'll have a link to the GitHub where you can check out like the entire change log for any of the additional info. But yeah, see if there's any games that you were looking to play that are available now, because there's quite a few added to the old list. And knowing these folks, there'll be another update soon. So whatever game you're waiting for, hopefully it'll be available in 9.0. So before we close it out today, we've got a couple questions in the question block. Remember, if you want to write in and get your thoughts read on the air or ask us a question for the question block, you can write into us at questions@flipscreen.games or head over to flipscreen.games and join our Discord. This one comes from Pacamera, who wrote in with a follow-up to last week's question about how we hold the controllers. And Pac said, personally, I map L1, R1 to L2 and R2, and L2, R2 to L3 and R3. So the sticks, right? The stick buttons for each game. My fingers just naturally rest on the L2, R2, and L3, R3 buttons. So it's perfect. I have big hands, by the way. I do wish Valve would add an option to map those buttons across the system instead of having to do it per game. If anyone knows how to do this, let me know.
How
That's insane to me. Like, I
What?
didn't even clock that it was the sticks. Are you
Yeah.
sure it's the sticks that you mean, Pacmara,
I mean,
not
they're
the buttons
saying
on the back?
L3, R3.
That's what that means, right? Am I
Yes,
crazy?
I think that is.
No,
No,
you're
I think
not.
you're right, because then it's 4 and 5 on the bottom.
Because it's 4 and
on the
5 on the back. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
100% right.
I
That's
really
mad.
hope. I
lose-
hope they'd made a mistake.
You
Because,
lose the
you
analog
lose-
as well
yeah,
from
you
the
lo-
triggers.
Yeah, I mean,
Crazy.
I don't understand it, but I respect it. Whatever works for you, Pac. I mean,
Imagine aiming down and then wanting to come out of aiming, and you have to hold the right stick in
while you're aiming.
to aim, and then you aim with it pushed in, and then if you just.
It's
kinda
funny
wanna
though.
see a
I
video
think that
of this.
actually used to. Now I'm thinking about that. I feel like I remember a shooter where that was the case, where you had to
you
click
held
and
in the.
it was old. It was prior to modern aiming. But I'm wondering if that plays an element where
Didn't L3 only come in the PS3 though? I'm pretty sure L3
No, that's
didn't.
been there
no, it
since
came out on
day
the
one.
PS1.
Did it?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I'll say this. It came in at the end of the PS1 generation because Ape Escape is a PS1 exclusive that requires analog sticks to be played, so you needed to get the original DualShock. But then the DualShock 2, which the PlayStation 2 controller, that had it on every unit, had the sticks. And they were
not
clickable.
sticks. I mean the clickable. Okay, right. Okay.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah, they were clickable.
right. Okay. Fine.
I can't say if they were on the original DualShock, but they definitely were on the 2.
No, they were. Because you could
It's
use a DualShock on a PlayStation 2.
You're
and it
right.
just
You're
worked
right.
fine.
Yeah, I remember doing that to play that game because I didn't
Mhm.
have an original DualShock. Yeah, I mean that's very interesting to me. I can't imagine playing that way, but it's also I can't imagine playing the way we talked about last week. So I mean, I think it's just always interesting to hear the different nuances
Different
of how
strokes for
people like
different
to play.
folks. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to add though, I did respond to Pacmara on Discord. You can map you sort of can map it for every game. It's not like say on the PlayStation or on Xbox or on Switch. But what I do, because I have I like to, rather than enabling gyro whenever I'm resting on the sticks, I like to enable gyro when I'm holding down the left trigger so I can use it in shooters, and only when I'm holding down the left trigger. So I've got a modification. I think they call them layers. When I hold that down, it enables gyro, and I've just created my own layout, and I've saved that as a template. And then every game I go into, I just set that as the template. It's literally just a modification of the game controller template that Valve ships with the Steam Deck, and all I've done is I've added that on. So you could take the existing game controller layout, make your modifications, save it as your own layout, and you can then use that across every single game that you want. You just then select it whenever you go into the game. and then it saves it anyway. It's a pain, but you'll only have to set it up once. You won't have to then go in and configure every single game.
for
you wanna
every
play.
single game.
Yeah.
So it sounds like worth doing.
It sounds like Steam should ask you every time you make these insane changes. They should go, "You sure? Like, you sure? You sure you want to do it? This isn't a mistake or a prank. Like, no one's got a gun to your head. Are you sure about this? If it works for
have
you,
you
it
checked
works
the
for you."
date? It's not April 1st. Are you sure this is what you want to do?
Yeah, like who has your Steam Deck? Blink twice.
Like, we need to scan your fingerprint so we can prove that someone isn't trying to tamper with your Steam
Mhm.
Deck. All right, this next question comes from Stevie Yaki, who wrote in and said, "Have you tried the flick aiming with the gyro? I've heard good things about it."
I briefly tried it, but I couldn't get to grips with it within like the 2 seconds I tried.
What does
And I
this
was
mean,
like,
sorry?
I want to play games, so I didn't bother. But I kind of want to go back.
But what
So
does it mean?
essentially, this is this was on the original Steam controller, that the majority of movements are done with gyro, and then you can quickly flick the stick or quickly flick your finger across the trackpad, and it's like it'll make quick movements. So you do the fine movements and then quickly move around as if you're moving a mouse really fast, and then
Okay.
if you're moving a mouse slowly, that is replicated with gyro. But I
So
couldn't
not
get to
in the
grips with
same
it.
way that like Splatoon has, you do your main movement with your stick and then you do like your fine tuning with the gyro. Not like that.
No, it's specifically you flick the stick, and that is like very broad movements, as if you're
Okay.
moving a mouse really quickly, and then the fine movements that you would do, like just
Okay.
tiny little movements on the mouse, that's done with the gyro.
Then my answer to this is no, obviously. So
Yeah, I don't like gyro controls. I just don't. I remember I told this story, I think, on the Flip Screen Games podcast before this show existed. When I first got my Steam Deck, like one of the first games I booted up was Left 4 Dead 2, because I wanted to play something that I was familiar with and that I would be able to, like, get a sense for how it felt. And I didn't realize that there was the gyro thing where whenever you had your thumbs on the sticks, the gyro would get activated. And I was like, what is going on? Like, why does the camera keep jerking? Like, because it was like I was like sitting like arched forward, like leaning on my, on my legs or whatever. And it was just like the tiny little micro movements in my hands were, like shaking the screen.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is happening?
You can make that more granular and fine, but that's why I specifically put gyro when I hold down the left trigger. You know, the game that
That makes a
converted
lot of
me.
sense.
Yeah, because it's like you're there, you're already zoomed in, you've made like the movement anyway, and then you just like making a fine correction. The game that converted me to that way of playing was Horizon Forbidden West, because they have that as an option in the settings of that game. You can go and turn on gyro controls, and it works in that very same way, that you hold down the left trigger, and then you can then make the fine corrections as you pull the right trigger to fire the arrow.
Yeah, and like I remember messing around with that when like they're like, "Oh, hey, like here's how you can do it," right? And it's like, I'm good. I think I'm good. I
Mhm.
feel like so clumsy with gyro controls, like I'm just like, like it very much takes me out of the moment of like aiming, and I'm like, I feel like I'm like very aware that I'm like a fucking dork, like holding a controller trying to be like, it's it reminds me of like all of the gyro what are they called? The little puzzles in Breath of the Wild. I can't think of what the name
Oh
is.
yeah, the gyro shrine puzzles. Yeah,
The
I never really
shrines.
liked
Yeah.
those.
And like
Oh, the
every
fact
one
I
of
had to
those,
try
I
one of
would just
those
like
recently.
just
Ugh.
shake my Switch until it was done. It's like just
There
shake
was
it until the
one
ball gets in
where
there.
you could just turn your controller upside down, and then the other side was a flat surface, and the ball would just roll across it.
Yep, I did
And
that the other day.
that was such a smart puzzle.
I hated it, but I did it the other day, and then. But what I liked about that was the second puzzle of there's a chest on there, and you have to set it in the right position so that you could then go and climb into the maze and run around the maze as Link. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Well, speaking of good stuff, all good things must come to an end, just like this episode of the Steam Deck podcast. But we had some fun today. Thank you guys for tuning in for another one. If you want to write in just like Pacamara and Stevie Yaki did to this week's question block, there's a bunch of ways you can hit us up. Don't forget, we've got an email, we've got a Discord, however you want to get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. And I do want to just call this out real quick. We do have a question from one Shidifu who asked us about just getting some more game recommendations for Steam Deck. And we have the question. We haven't answered it the last 2 weeks because we just haven't run out of time in the show. But I promise you we will get to it next week and we'll give it a nice chunk of time so you can get
I have
a nice
recommendations ready for you.
People should write in with their own recommendations as well. If
That
you've
would
got
be great. That would be great.
recommendations,
Let's have a big
specifically,
recommendation half
it's
of the...
it's games that run really well on the Steam Deck that would never run on a Nintendo Switch because that's kind of where they've come from. So I'd love to have like more recommendations of like indie games like Dredge
please.
that Max recommended. That would be really cool.
Let's spend next week or a chunk of next week recommending games that we think that people might not have heard of or played that would run. They could be older games, but also for people to recommend games they might think that we like. We've spoken a great deal on this podcast about games that we like. Surely people have an idea for our tastes. Maybe there's some games we're not aware of. Let's hear them. Write in, comment. We'll sort of read some out to you, and yeah.
And the other thing I do want to go for is I want to make sure that we give our selection of like some of the, because they do specifically call out, you know, a lot of like more indie focused stuff. But I think there are also a lot of really great big AAA games that run surprisingly well on Steam Deck. Yeah. And I think we can kind of whittle that list down for folks too if you're looking for that next game. So yeah, we'll come with a bunch of our own recommendations, and I'd love to hear from you guys in the audience as well. So make sure you write in either questions at flipscreen.games. Come and join our Discord where we've got a Steam Deck podcast channel where you can come and reply to the most previous or the most recent week's episode and get your thoughts included over there as well. So however you choose to write in, we'd love to hear from you for next week's show. So make sure you go and do it. Remember, that's flipscreen.games. That's a website where you can find all the links all over the place for how you can support us and get involved in the show and all that good stuff. For the crew, I've been Pete, he's been Steve, and he's been Max all the way over there. Thank you guys for tuning in for another episode of the Steam Deck Podcast. We'll see you next week, babies.